接下来我们要邀请，刚刚还有人记得我们说这个今年的主题是什么的吗？有人记得吗？有人记得吗？没有人记得。哦，好，没关系。我们待会呢要请 Charles McKinley 来给我们讲一下 HTML5。好，我们今年的主轴。Charles 呢是一个非常神奇的人物，他目前在 Opera 工作，曾经在 W3C 基金会有长达6年的时间的经验，以及10几年的网络的无障碍环境部分的工作。那今天我们非常荣幸的邀请他从西班牙远道而来，到这边来给我们讲一下这个最新的技术。我们用掌声欢迎他，谢谢。
谢谢。你好。谢谢。我爱 Coscup。That's pretty much it. For those of you who don't want to listen to English, now is a good time to get a book. Start checking out that IRC channel. Thank you very much for having me. It's a big honor to be here. This is the first time I've been to Taiwan, and I'm never quite sure what to expect. But after a day, mostly what I'm expecting is a lot of fun and a lot of interesting stuff. So you've only got an hour and the fun starts. I'm going to talk about HTML5 and about some stuff that isn't HTML5. I'm going to talk about other web technology that's being developed, because there's a lot of it. I'm going to talk a little bit about how these things get made. Where do these standards come from? How does W3C work? How many people in here have been involved in a W3C working group? Anyone? A couple? How many people have been involved in an open source project? Bunch more. They're not that dissimilar, which is both good and bad. And then I'm going to talk about a few specific examples, and I'm going to talk about accessibility, because I've spent getting close to 3/4 of my life working on accessibility stuff, mostly as a hobby or as a second job or something else to do. And it's important, and I think it's interesting. So I'm going to begin with HTML5. Who here is a web developer? Who here does web stuff, or makes web pages? Hands up so I can see. Quite a few. How many people have read the HTML5 specification? All of it. All of it. Good, so you're all sane and intelligent. How many people have read some of it? A few. How many people read HTML4? Like the whole... Yeah, I used to be less clever. I read the whole thing. What's new in HTML5? For people who aren't sure, there's one thing that I think is the coolest thing of all in HTML5, and it's not really a feature. It's not Canvas, it's not Forms. It's the fact that HTML5 explains how you make a web browser deal with pages you get on the web. Because HTML4 and 3 and 2 and 1 all said HTML is putting this tag at the start, and then one of these tags, and then one of these tags. And people went to make browsers And they said, so we expect one of these tags and one of these tags and one of these tags. And if you make a browser that implements HTML4, then it's going to be almost useless. Right? Anyone know how many browsers completely and accurately implement HTML4 entirely? Anyone want to guess? Zero. There are no HTML4 implementations. Now that's not so bad, because a browser that expected HTML4 wouldn't be able to render Google.com. It's not HTML. It's some tags that look like HTML, but you know, I can get magnetic Chinese characters, put them on the fridge, make a big line, and say, look, I wrote Chinese. It's not Chinese if it doesn't mean something in Chinese. It's not just Google.com, it's a huge amount of the web. Most of the web is not HTML. It's stuff that looks similar. It's got tags, but it's got errors and mistakes. Until now, every browser had to try and understand what the person who wrote the code was trying to do. And there are lots and lots of common ways of doing that. But no browser renders every page on the web. Right? It just doesn't happen that all pages will work in your browser. Because instead of implementing HTML4, we started with HTML, then we tried to copy some bugs in IE. Because important websites copied their code, made it work in IE, even though it wasn't HTML. So we tried to make those pages work in the browser. Then Firefox copied one of us and tried to understand what we did to make the pages work. And then people made their pages work in Firefox, so everything broke again. It was horrible. It's still horrible. Now, the best browsers, maybe 95, 97% of pages will work, at most. HTML5 does something new. It says, whatever you get, whatever the tool produced, Dreamweaver, a CMS, somebody scribbling code by hand, here's how you make it into a web page. What that means is all the browsers can do the same thing, not just with the 1% of pages that are HTML, but with the 99% of pages that actually are not HTML, they just look very like it, and the author thinks it was HTML. That's a really cool thing. That means we can make browsers that do the same thing. And that means developers can write pages and expect them to work. And users can therefore expect them to work too. So that's the most exciting thing for me in HTML5. I can't think of anything more boring. You can't do a demo for that. You know, it's like, look, the page turns on. But that's something that's there. There are a number of other features, and I'm going to look into some of them and talk about some of them. HTML5 has a whole lot of multimedia. Try this mic. This mic works better? Yes? Wave from the back if this mic works better. Okay. So, yeah, I get feedback too. There's lots of multimedia in HTML now that wasn't there. 10 years ago, there was not very much video on the web. There was some. There was not a lot of interactive graphics. There was the occasional animated GIF. Forms were very basic. drag and drop was something you did in Java applets or applications, and so on. I'm going to show a dumb, stupid demo. This is all HTML5. It's simple, magic, and it's basic. I have another one. This is HTML5 too. It has a cute video. It's just using some canvas, some new forms, elements to make things happen. HTML5, when I talk about it, is a W3C specification. Right? There is a document that people are writing, a lot of people, at W3C, and they're arguing about what goes in and what doesn't. And whatever ends up in that document is what I mean when I say HTML5. If you read the blogs and read the papers, listen to what people say, they'll show you HTML5 demos that are all CSS or JavaScript or some other stuff. There's a lot of things that are important now that are not in HTML5. They're just things we're doing at the same time. Really, it doesn't matter whether you call this stuff HTML5 or not. If you want to talk to other people, you need to communicate, and whether you use the name perfectly correctly is not important. But there's all this cool stuff that's being done. CSS transitions. Woo. Thank you. I did that myself. As you'll see further on, I'm a terrible programmer and an even worse designer. But even I can use CSS transitions. I had a geo demo, but it doesn't seem to be there. Further on. Web fonts, rounded corners. These rounded corners here, how important do you reckon they are? How important is it to have rounded corners on a web page? Very important. How many millions of dollars have been spent by designers to get rounded corners? How many $1 million in bandwidth has been used to ship down extra images? How many $1 million has been spent in hardware that can show rounded corners faster, in upgrading phone networks to show rounded corners? The answer is actually, it's really, really important. You know, if you had that kind of money, you could do something like cure cancer, or buy nice wine and fancy cars for all of us. But no, they spent it on rounded corners. Now you can do it in CSS. It takes 3 seconds, and there's lots more money available, lots more resources to do something useful. So we could all get a Mercedes, right? Or we could get a new request saying, we want rounded corners to actually change the way that they're rounded as you... No, forget it. One of the things that's not in HTML5 is some of the accessibility stuff that was in HTML4. HTML4 was a great big improvement for people with disabilities. You could do things that you couldn't do nicely before to make the web work better for everybody. Some of those things